My name is Sergio. Today we're going to talk about the oxyacetylene torch. Oxyacetylene torch consists of two tanks, oxygen and acetylene. Usually your acetylene is going to be half the size of your oxygen, usually. When you first start to work with the oxygen acetylene, make sure that your area doesn't have anything that is flammable or combustible. For example, paint, just any rags, acetone rags, anything like that that might catch on fire. You want to make sure your space is clear. If you can have some ventilation, that would be best. Anytime you move these tanks, you want to move them, bring them to your workspace in a close area, but not too close, obviously. And then you want to let them rest for 15 minutes, because in here there's a sponge, and the acetylene is in liquid form, and when you move it around or turn it on its side, it moves, and you want all that liquid to settle down to the bottom of the sponge. Before we start it, pressures are very important for the acetylene and the oxygen. Oxygen is never going to go over 60 or 80 psi, and acetylene really should never go past 15 psi. And the regulators are right there. When we turn on these tanks, we'll turn on the acetylene quarter of a turn, and we'll turn on the oxygen all the way open. Reason for that is if there's any kind of backfire or any kind of emergency, you can quickly shut off the gas, quickly isolate the system from the fuel that's causing the fire. So to start it, we'll have safety glasses. Tinted glasses would be best, but since we're outside and it's already bright, we don't need them a whole lot. And gloves, for sure gloves. It's going to be hot. Since it's already turned on, we want to make sure our pressure gauges are fine, and that just double check everything around you is fine. This right here is a striker. This is what we use to start the oxyacetylene. You crack your acetylene first, your fuel first, and you start that. You're going to open it until it starts to look like a feather. And that soot is about to, it's like almost coming off, but there's no more soot. Then you're going to open your oxygen. That's what you want right there. Those defined tones is what you want. And by adjusting the oxygen, you can adjust how defined or how sharp those tones are. We want them pretty sharp. And those tones are the hottest part of the torch, of the flame. So when we heat, we'll be touching the metal with those tones, but we will not be rubbing the steel with the tip. Because if we touch the torch head to the steel, it'll make a popping sound, and that can push the flame down to the background. So when we heat it, we'll only heat it with these tips. So I'm pretty close in there, but I'm not touching it, but the cones are really close in there. Also notice that I'm wearing long pants, not shorts, closed-toed shoes, so that if there's any slag that falls from here and it hits my toes or my shoe, it won't go in between my toes and won't injure me. Long sleeves that are fire retardant, just in case there's any slag that comes up from this heat. Another thing that would be handy to have in hand would be a bucket of water, so that when we're done working this, we can quench it, and then it's no longer dangerous for anything. Working with anything hot, pliers and clamps are always going to be your friend. Anytime you want to turn this torch off, you're going to turn it off opposite of how you started it. So we turn on the fuel first, we're going to shut that off last. First we'll shut off the oxygen, giving us a flame back to this, and then we'll slowly shut off the acetylene, fully turning off that flame, then cutting off the acetylene, that quarter turn, and then fully closing the oxygen. And just a little bit on this torch. It's all brass, and none of this gets oiled, and it all gets hand tightened when you're assembling it. So if you've got to change out this tip, this is a rosebud for heating materials so that you can bend them or shape them. You can also change them into cutting tips or into brazing tips, or all sorts of tips and sizes of them. This is all tightened by hand so that you don't squeeze and ruin the seals that are in there. Once those seals are ruined, then you're pretty much got to buy a new torch. These right here are reverse thread so that you cannot put them in the opposite ones. So these will go counterclockwise and the other ones will go clockwise. These are pretty tight. Same up here, reverse thread and then normal thread. Another thing is, when you're done using these for the day, not for like if you're going to lunch, you can leave it like this. If you're done using it for the day, you have to take these off. You take these regulators off and cap these with the tank caps that they have. If they're stiff around here, you can clean this up with a wire wheel, clean the inside of the cap with a wire wheel, but you cannot put any type of grease here. And the purpose of that is because this is already such an unstable, inflammable gas that any grease in there, you're just adding one more element to the fire, which is oxygen, fuel, and spark. So you don't want anything there that's going to catch on fire. These, if they're tight, they'll come off. You can hit them with a hammer. Never put grease on these, and store them away from each other. So the acetylene will go in a corner of the shop and the oxygen will go on the other corner of the shop, so that there's no chance of a fire happening. When you're done using it, just for a few minutes, you can wrap up this cord around the tanks like this and set this on top. When you're moving this, always make sure that you can see where you're going to go with it. If you're going to take it to a corner of the shop, make sure that that corner is free of debris. You're not going to have to set this, stop this, and then have to move some buckets or whatever you have to move out of the way. You want to make sure it's clear, and you want to make sure that the ground doesn't have too much sand or grinding dust that is going to make you slip, because these torches are pretty heavy. So when you move these torches, make sure that you feel comfortable about moving them, because that's all solid steel. And also make sure that you have a nice sturdy dolly base for it, or some way that you have to hold them together and upright. You want to make sure it has a solid base, so somebody comes by and bumps it, it's not going to hit it. Yeah, store them away from each other. Be careful when you transport them. Hand tighten these, and always wear your PPE like gloves, long sleeves, pants, closed-toed shoes. Do not use a lighter to start this. You always should have a striker on the machine, on the torch, and always keep clamps around you. Don't have any sawhorses that are going to be out of wood. And if it's ventilated, you don't need to have a mask on to heat things up. But if you're going to heat things up and those things were priorly painted, or they have some kind of finish or oil on them, then you should remove that oil before you start to heat it, or wear a mask so that when you heat it, you're not inhaling all those toxic fumes. My name is Sergio, and thank you for listening to my presentation.